it is time to finally bring these tracks out, I think. I wanted to show what I was doing just going into the mastering phase here, last couple tracks, and then do some drum programming on the stream. I'm not sure if we're going to get to the drum programming today because I am playing D&D in a little while, and so I won't have too terribly much time. But I've got a little bit. I figured I'd this show a little bit of this process here, because compression was really confusing for me, and finding any information about how to do it right was really a challenge. So I'll share my mastering journey with you, and maybe you can learn a little something too and help that polish on your tracks. So what I'm needing to do, I've got this track here, and it's sounding pretty good, but it sounds basic. All the sounds sound fairly basic, and I've done a lot of sound design behind that to make it sound less basic, but it's still got that basic kind of sound, and that is because I haven't done compression to it. This is just a thing that your ears are used to hearing in all sorts of pop music, EDM, basically any genre of music. There's a lot of compression going on. So what is this compression stuff? Well, let me show you. Got a piano here, which is maybe a little too quiet. 0. Raise the volume here. Bit loud. That's probably better. That's maybe a bit too loud. Okay. Yeah, so we've got this piano. Very nice, right? Sounds kind of pretty. But you'll notice that all we've got on this is an equalizer, and it's doing some cool stuff. You know, tuning our sound, make it sound pretty lo-fi, pretty neat. But and without this, it sounds very basic and lame. Let's make it sound way better. But we need to do some more stuff to this. There's a few things we want to do with this. First off, I usually put the equalizer down here because there are things that need to go before this. We put audio dynamics, platinum reverb here. Actually, this is where this goes, and then a stereo spread. So all 4 of these things need to go on each of our sounds and be tuned a little bit differently by the sound and where we want to place it in the mix, and what kind of sound it is. Let's start just with the AU Dynamics processor here. This is just a free compressor. It's very effective. It comes with GarageBand. Quite useful. And you can see if we press a key, that little blue arrow moves up. So that is the sound level of this. And what we can do is drag this central dot down. Let's drag it all the way down here. You can see when I press the key, there's not really anything. Pretty much silent. You hear like a click. That's it. So what this does is it cuts out sound above this curve here, and the curve is defining different loudnesses. So essentially what this will do is take the very loudest parts of the sound and remove those and leave only the quieter parts of the sound. So what we can use this to make sounds sound less harsh on the ear, a bit rounder, you might imagine. So you can see there's a very slight compression here, but we actually want to have fairly significant compression, something more like down here around 30 or 35, rather minus 60. And we want to take this down to about, generally speaking, 20 seems to be the amount of headroom that I see people recommending. Somewhere around there, you might want to fiddle with that. Mileage may vary. And then where this little central dot goes depends on the sound and how loud it is. So then we'll click on the details. We want to change this to be very, very fast. So super low, I like 0.05. And then make this pretty long, so we can do 0.75 here. Oops, there we go. We can make it a long release and a short attack. This is the settings I like. You can do it how you like. But that will hold it for that 0.75 of a second. It will hold that compressor on. So even if after I take my hands off the key, it's still applied. That's why we get that ringing sound here. And so we need to also do a downwards compression, a gate here, to cut that out to make it stop. And then we have full control over how long the sound rings out and how it rings out by the slope of this line here. We can drag it out and get a subtle, like a wah, 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 ringing away, or we can have a straight vertical line and make it like a chop. That will make it stop immediately. What I want to do here is just single this out. That's pretty nice. I think maybe we cut that a bit sooner. And we'll give that just a little bit of a tail here, just so that we don't get like clipping on speakers, that sort of thing. Better to have slopes in places. And then you'll notice, though, if we turn this off, this is quite a bit quieter, and that's actually not what we want. We're trying to tame the sound, but we're not trying to make it, we're not trying to reduce it, if that makes sense. So that is what this third master gain down here is for. We want to raise this so that it's about the same volume. Let's try 3. That's still a little too quiet. Try something like 6. That's perhaps a bit too loud. Well, not by much, so I think 5.5 is going to be spot on. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we have now done compression on this sound. It is trimmed out the very loudest parts of the tone and brought into focus the quieter parts of the tone. That'll make it sound a little more unique, give it a bit more body, and also make it a little less harsh on the eardrums, which is really nice. And so this is a very important step. This is what we're going to be, one of the main things we're going to be focusing on today. The reverb is a lot easier to do. It just depends on what sound you're going for. So for this, our keys, we don't really want these to be a central thing. So you'll see that spread there set to 100. That is spreading out left and right. So this is an evenly spread reverb here. And if we bring this down, then that will sort of squash the sound so that if we have headphones on, it'll sound more like it's coming from the center right in front of us rather than from the sides. And if we increase this, it will make it sound further away or more behind us and sort of overlap the sounds. So where you put this is very important, and this can help a lot to create some space for sounds that are at similar octave ranges. So if you have two, say, things in the third octave, you can use this to spread one of them out and bring one of them closer to the center, and then suddenly you can hear both sounds a little more distinctly. They won't clash as much. So this is another thing we're going to work on. Also, you can give things the exact same spread, and things that clashed before sometimes will merge together into sort of one big super sound, and we're going to be doing that with several of these. Because there's a lot of layering going on, and we want things to sound like one sound, maybe having a filter moved around or that sort of thing. Very much. Okay, so let's see. We've got that one done. Let's take a. Oh, let's go ahead and listen to the song as it is. Give that a listen, and we'll then take a listen to it afterwards and see how we've changed. kind of interesting. Like I was saying before, it needs some work on the sound design. We need to do a lot of compression, we need to do some reverb, we need to do some direction mixing and stereo spreading. It all sounds pretty basic. Some of the sounds are even overlapping a bit and clashing. Once we spread things out a bit, we're going to be able to hear some of the sounds that were clashing a bit better. It's going to sound way, way nicer. And honestly, if I may say so myself, I think it sounds pretty good. I hope you do too. We're going to take it even further. I go even further beyond, as it were. But, and then we're going to do these drums custom. Because a lot of these drums, this is just a loop, as you can see here. But I actually am pretty good at drum programming. So we're going to make our own custom snare. And I've already got a bunch of kick sounds that I've made and overlap those. Get some claps going and that kind of thing. So we'll redo the drums quite a bit. These are just filler for now, although I do like these, so we'll probably make something pretty similar. Let's see. So, yes, back to these effects. We've done the compression here for this first sound, and we're going to do these 4 things for all of our sounds here. This AU Dynamics processor, Platinum Verb, channel EQ, and stereo spread. This is a nice basic setup, and then from here, eventually we'll export these stems. Say if we have 3 layers that make one sound, we'll export that as a single WAV file and then bring that back in to GarageBand in a separate band file, and we'll use that to do mastering. So instead of working with all this MIDI, we'll start working with audio files, and that'll be a lot easier for a lot of reasons. So that's going to be really nice too, but we need to get this compression dialed in. We need to make all the sounds tamer and also kind of working together a bit better before we export these. Let's see. Yes, Platinum Verb here. So with this sound, this is one of our... What role does this play here? Right, so this is something we definitely want to be very spacey. We want it way out there in the mix. So we can start right now. We'll just put it out at like 180. I don't like to go much further out than that. And let's raise this up to like 7,000. Also, I think 3 seconds is way too much for this a lot of the time. Something like 1.25 is even a lot. And this pre-delay is really high too. So I really like about 2 milliseconds of pre-delay just to start. We might mess with things beyond that. Let's turn this on and see how that sounds. Turn that off, we can hear this. Back on. It's very subtle, but it brings out that ring a little bit around the edges. That's exactly what we want, is to give it just a little bit more of a dynamic feel. It does sound a little bit dry, so if we bring this down, if you aren't familiar, if we take this down to say 0, let me just click on it and type. You can hear it's a lot of the punch of the sound is gone, and it's really just the resonant harmonics there. So that's the dryness of the tone. And I think this is a little bit too dry and not quite wet enough, which would be the reverb of the tone. So if we drag this up to about 60, that's nicer. That's a good amount of reverb here, quite a lot. And then we can take this to maybe 80. And compare this to the original sound. Yeah, that sounds to me a lot similar. You know, we don't want to make it too quiet or anything like that with the reverb, but also it has a little bit more space. It's a bit more dynamic. That's exactly what we're going for. From here, we want to turn the EQ on, and remember, this was one of the things that made this sound so good in the first place. We'll slap in an EQ on top of this. Quite nice. We can hear without the reverb and compression what we had before. That's without the reverb. And that's without our compression. Here it's got that bite to it. Not very much attack there. And that compression will just take that right out. And then the reverb will give it the space. Very, very good. From here, now we've got all of this stuff spread out. There's this very spacious sound, but say we've got tones from over on the left and tones from over on the right being very spacious and spread out and kind of overlapping. and that's not so good. So what we want to do is kind of sort things with a stereo spread. We can take all of this and take the low tones and bring those to the middle, and take the high tones and push those outwards. And in fact, what we're going to do here is take the middle tones and push those out a little bit and leave the low tones alone, and then take the high tones and push those out further. I'll show you how we do this if we, oh, I don't think you can actually see these windows that I'm bringing up for GarageBand here. You can't actually, you can't see my changes to the settings. I wonder how I might address that. I'll have to consider that, but what we're going to do is use that stereo spread here. We're going to select medium, mid, and high frequency spread, and that will again add that spaciousness to this. It's got a lot of tones in the middle range, which for reference is around, say, 500 to 5,000 or so. Well, 5,000 is getting into the higher range, and then say 3,000 or 4,000 to 10,000 is the higher end. For reference, 20,000 is about as high as any human can hear. This is hertz. And frequency, so the higher frequency, the higher the pitch tone. And most adults can't hear higher than 17,000 hertz. So if you have tones higher than that, it will just sound kind of irritating to their ears. It's good to kind of cut a lot of that out of many of your tones. Although some of those tones sound really nice. For example, your hi-hats, that's an example of something that registers up around 15K hertz to 10K hertz. And that's not something you want to cut out. That sounds really, really good. It's more the synths can be a bit whiny if you don't cut that out. So you can see here I cut around 7,500 on this tone. This will vary by tone, but I like to use around 7,000 as a starting point for a high cut. And we'll mess around. This equalizer was already done. A lot of these equalizers have already been done, which is really good. So here to this track, you can see this track has the exact same equalizer. It's just got some slightly different settings on it, and some different notes input to it as well. We bring up the notes at the bottom here. You can see we have some pretty drawn out whole notes here that are very, very high pitched, and up in the 4th octave. And here we have very, very short notes in the 4th octave. So these are in the same octave, but one of these is very short and one of these is very long. So we get this pressing kind of pattern where you have a ba and then a ba, ba, ba on top of it, which works really, really nice for creating a like sort of groove in the early part of the track. But since these are in the same octave, we do kind of want to spread them out a little bit. We either want to merge them together into one thing or spread them out a little bit. And I want these little punchy, airy key hits to kind of stand out a bit more. So what I'm thinking is we take this 180 and we drop this down a little bit. Let's drop it down to say 170. And then we put these airy keys here. We put this one at 180 so that they're just a little further spread out to the ear. And those more punchy sounds can stand in a bit more. We'll want a reverb there. We'll want dynamics processor there. And this would be more interesting if you could see the dynamics processor. I wonder if I could, if I do this not in full screen. Bear with me a moment. I'm going to see if I can put this on the screen here. Surely I can. Definitely be interesting. Let's see. See it. The only thing I see is the GarageBand. Huh. Well, that doesn't work then. Maybe not. Okay. I think I would have to show my whole monitors. well, I don't want to stop the whole stream for that. I'll figure that out. Let's see, perhaps there is a way to get it to display down in the bottom. I guess not. Then I guess I'll talk through what I'm doing. I am using the AU Dynamics processor. Effectively, you get a square with a line through it. There's a curve coming off of it, and you move this curve around, and that cuts out the loudest parts, allows space for the quieter parts of the tone. That's generally what we're going to do. So we're going to move some of this around and do some specific, well, not so specifically. It varies by the tone, but it's going to be the same as the other one, or very close to it. Give this one out. So about minus 60 for the threshold, about 20 decibels of headroom, and then about an expansion ratio of 6 for the expansion threshold. Expansion threshold down at about 65. Bit of an expansion ratio. Some doesn't have to be perfect. And then we want to make sure to give that a very, very short attack time on the compressor. So it's going to take effect almost immediately. And we want to give it a long release to make sure that it takes a long time to let go of that. We're going to mess with it a little bit to make sure that the volume didn't. This should be quite a bit quieter than it was before. And you can see we've taken a lot of that tone out there. There, louder as we turn the compressor on and off. You can see that down in the bottom left by it turning gray or blue. So with this compressor on for a sec, we're going to raise the volume, I think by a few decibels, perhaps 5.5 was what worked for the other one. It's still a bit too quiet. Let's raise this up a bit more. How about 7? Still too quiet. Let's give it maybe 9 decibels. That's sounding closer. But I think our threshold for this is actually a little too low. Raise this compression threshold up so we're not compressing this quite so hard. And then also, so that when it stops, you hear it ring out. That's also something that the compressor is doing, is giving it that ring afterwards. We want to tune that ring a little bit. That's a bit too hard of a cut. Let's give it a bigger expansion ratio, or rather a smaller expansion. That's nicer. Yeah, you hear it fade out very gradually. In fact, that's perhaps too slow of a fade out. Give it a bit harsher. And then now I think this is a little too loud though. Let's drop it down to 7. There. Well, nope, this is a bit too loud now. And this is sort of how it goes, is we just mess with it a little bit till we get it just right. That sounds good. And then we slap a stereo mix on it. The next one. Oh, hello. Hi, sad guy. Yeah, glad to have you here. Hi. I'm just hanging out, working on music a little bit. I'm gonna play some Dungeons and Dragons later today, and then I've got a little bit of work to do tonight. But I wanted to show off part of my process here with this compression and effects going into mastering. Did you catch the track earlier? I did a playthrough of it. I'll give you a play of the drop here. That's the drop as well. Yeah, hey, glad to hear it. Um, be glad to see you next time you're here. Thanks for stopping by. Always glad to have you. You also do these. So nothing, well, we've done one thing in that part so far, which was this set of airy keys here. We've done 2 sounds overall, so let's get on to the 3rd sound here. You see, I've done the EQs for a lot of these. We're most of the way done. In that regard, EQs are really the hard part. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're just getting started polishing it up, so pretty good is honestly a good place to be when it hasn't had really any mastering done to it at all. So that's fantastic. So we want to do some compression, reverb, and a stereo spread. Some of these we might want to do some other sounds. I really like the de-esser, which kind of takes out the sharpness of sounds if there's still some left over after compression. There is also the limiter, which is another type of compressor that can prevent sounds from being too loud passing at all without really doing much volume modulation on other things. That's also a fairly good option. I like to use that on certain things like bass tones that don't have a lot of resonance or that I want to remove the resonance from. Use a limiter on those and make them sound a bit more flat. Cool. Let's see. But to do this compression here, we need to single this tone out. We want to just trim it a bit so it sounds nicer. Up there. Slight less headroom. And that'll take out a bit of the resonance. I like this. We've compressed it to the point now where the percussive element of the key is kind of being raised up in volume a bit. So we can hear that click, 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 click. And I think with the rhythm of the song, having this key form a bit more of a percussive element, it's pretty nice. See how that sounds if we raise this up a few octaves, or a few decibels. We also want to, again, lengthen the release and shorten the attack on compressor so that it takes effect really quickly. And then we also need to adjust this tail to give it some sort of ring out, but not anything too crazy. That's a bit abrupt, a bit less than. Nice. Let's see, is it loud enough though? A bit louder. Let's try 5. Yeah, that sounds similar. We've got that sort of dialed in. And the volumes don't have to be too perfect right now. I'm gonna off stream do a little bit of mixing just to before I compress these sounds into the WAVs. So they're, say, all these 3 airy key layers will just be one WAV file that we'll be working with in the next stage, and I'll adjust the volume level to that. A touch more balanced, because try though we might, they're still going to be slightly off compared to where they were before. We're probably going to want to fiddle with them. But that's some good compression there. This one, we probably want to have even closer. So we put the top airy keys here the furthest out at 180. And then we have the middle airy keys at 170 spread. Let's drop these down to like 165. A little further in, I guess 164. And the default here that I have is just wrong. Although I guess I can't see it. But we've got a bunch of parameters that we can set. We can, for reverb, we can set pre-delay, reverb time, high cut, spread, dry, and wet. And pretty much all of these we want low. So we want to take pre-delay down to usually 0 to 2 milliseconds. Having too high of a pre-delay can on the wrong sound can make things sound way too spacey and kind of washed out, which is really not what you want. Likewise, the reverb time we want to be pretty low too, because again, same problem. You wind up getting really washed out. Something like 1.25 seconds or just 1 second is even pretty long. And I think the default is like 3 seconds or something wild like that. So if you're working with GarageBand, make sure to bring those down a notch. That's a bit overkill on the reverb. And then we'll take our high cut up from 6,000, which is the default, up to about 7,000. That's where I put most of my high cuts. You can go higher. I like kind of like the lo-fi vibe that a lower high cut on your reverb brings. I'm going to bring this dry down about 80, bring the wet up maybe 60. Let's give it a listen. That's weird. Why was that playing? That's with the reverb, and then without. Very subtle, just bringing out those higher notes there, bringing out some of the, even the middle notes too, and echoing those outwards. And here we can, if we listen to both of these together, we should be able to hear them both, even though they're pretty close together in pitch, because of that slight difference in their spread. Yeah, that's nice. In fact, I might make this a bit more dry. Perhaps too much. Something like 85% dry, 50% wet. Pretty nice. Actually, let's bring the reverb time down. 3/4 second. You hear that reverb echoing out. That's that tone that we're adding with the verb here. Is that ring that happens when we stop playing. And once again, we'll take this and we'll sort these sounds. We want to sort out the mid and the high frequencies. And that will, if you have surround sound, I'm sure you felt that right away as soon as I enabled that, because that is pretty dramatic. If you don't have surround sound, you're probably like, what? I'm on a phone. But yeah, if you have speakers, then that is very, very noticeable. Right, so here's the bass tone that we have. This is our 808 that is thrumming in the background, the wah, that just keeps going. That. Quite nice. It's not actually very distorted. It sounds, because of all the other stuff going on, sounds like it is more distorted than it is. That's something called the Reese effect. That makes it sound like it's kind of waving and wobbling because there's these other competing bass tones that are distorted. It's actually a pretty pure 808 tone. Very nice. And we've got a limiter on it, brick wall limiter, and that is pretty aggressive, which is giving it that nice flattened out tone. We can see if we play it, you see that it doesn't actually go very high. It always stops at a certain height here. And actually, I should point out that that is more of a slope, but yes, it doesn't go too high. No matter how hard we press the key, even if we crammed the volume all the way up, it would still stay limited by that limiter. Then we do have a stereo spread on this, but we're actually going to put a reverb and a compressor between or before the limiter. We want to limit the reverb too. There's probably not going to be any reverb to limit, but might as well if we're going to limit it. And then we'll have that EQ come after it and a stereo spread there. Our equalizer actually, oh, I just noticed didn't have that high cut on, but it does now. Good, we want to make sure to have that. Let's see. we've got, and then we want to mess around with this. Now, for the bass tones, you want to do your reverb totally differently. This is not the kind of sound you want to be washed out, spread way out. So even 100% spread is way too much. I'm going to bring this down to like 50% spread. That's going to do is actually take the bass tones that would normally be further out and bring them inwards and kind of overlap them, which is pretty subtle, but you can hear the difference. We're going to do the high cut at 7,000 for our reverb. As usual, that's way too high. It's not going to affect the bass at all. But more importantly, we're going to bring this reverb time down to 0.5 seconds or less, which is basically almost the minimum, so that we're not adding on a huge extra tail to the end of this with reverb. And also the pre-delay, we're going to bring down to 0 seconds. Pre-delay on bass tones just sounds really muddy and bad. That's much clearer. We've got that punch in there that we want to have. If you have that pre-delay, that just makes it sound really gross. It sounds all gargly. And then, let's see. We do want this nice and dry. We do want to put a little bit of wet here, so let's maybe try 50. And we can even afford to take maybe 5% off the dry here. Sounds pretty nice. We also need to do this compressor. Try something like this. And then we can, again, we want to shorten the attack on the compressor to close to the minimum. Raise the attack, or raise the release on the compressor pretty high, and then add on some gain. Let's try 4 decibels. Without the compressor? With the compressor? You can hear it's taken a lot of that fuzz out, which is cool sounding on its own, but actually will muddy up the mix and make the sound a lot less clean overall. The ear really just wants to hear this. It doesn't actually need that muddy sound to hear that tone and be like impacted by it, I guess. Yeah. And this is probably already cleaned up pretty significantly. And compared to without that compressor. Although I think the compressor is making it a bit quiet. Yeah, there's all of that extra muddiness to it, but this is too quiet. Let's add on a couple more decibels here. Maybe like 6 decibels is about right. I think we've got our threshold a bit low here. Let's actually raise this threshold up. Put a little bit of that fuzz in there, but not too much. That's probably about right. It's a touch loud, so we'll drop this down to 5. I think that's perfect for now. And this should sound a little bit nicer on the 808. Yeah, just a touch of that growl, but not nearly as much growl as there was before. Too much growl. Very muddy, and when we got into the more complicated parts of the song, it was just too so good that we've trimmed that out a bit. And for this, it's a bass tone, right? So we want to do a low frequency spread. And we can choose medium low frequency and high frequency, or light low frequency and high frequency with this particular spreader. You might have some more options. We could also use like a proper direction mixer. I'm going to save that for the mastering part of things, once I figure out how to actually show you these little sub windows. But for now, we're just going to do medium, low frequency, and high frequency spread on this. So, yeah, for those of you with speakers, that is probably quite noticeable. It's on and off there. All right, next tone here. We've got the divine bass. This is a stock sound. We've done some stuff to it already to make it way less stock, but this is one of the stock sounds. See, that is not how that sound normally behaves, but that is how our sound is behaving. Single this out here. Pretty nice. It's got a kind of a bow sound to it. It's a really good layer to have around because it sort of functions as a bass lead, and whatever you have around it will sort of take part in that and become a part of the bass lead, which is pretty nifty. Those bow sounds are good for that. Let me actually take that. Okay, it's nicer. And active here. So this is pretty nice, but there's some stuff we need to do here. So we've already got a few effects on it to make it less stock. One of these effects is a stereo spread. One of these effects is an equalizer. But we want to put a couple more things on here. Let's put some initial compression. And then we also want some initial reverb. And we're going to go with the same, very similar settings. I guess not exactly the same, but we're going to drop the pre-delay down to 0. We're going to drop the reverb time down to ½ a second. It is commonly the minimum for reverb. And then we're going to bring the spread down. We're going to try it at 50 with the other bass tone and just see how this overlaps, giving it the exact same setting. Now this may clash a touch, in which case we can slide these around a bit more. Yeah, I think it would be better to have the bass spread out slightly more than this. So perhaps we do something more like 70 for the 808 spread and 50 for this sort of pseudo lead here. Yeah, there we go. Now we've got a bit more separation for them. So that even though they're similar tones at similar octaves, they won't clash as much, and you can perceive both of them a bit more clearly. And this is pretty much what we need to do for the whole thing, is make it so that all of these sounds that are overlapping sound better together and stop clashing so much. That's what's making this sound sort of sound unprofessional or basic, you might say. That's the sort of textbook noob sound, is that there's no direction mixing, there's no compression, all of that. And we've got a case of noob sound syndrome here. We're fixing it. We're fixing it, though. It's getting good. So our reverb here is pretty nice to start with. We can check out the compression. Now the compression, again, this is something you just kind of have to fiddle with. Like that tone. Go with that. That sounds pretty cool. And we're going to need to give it a low gate and some sort of echo out, something like this. Okay, nice. And we want to give it a very short attack, very long release. Then a few decibels. Yeah, pretty rad. Got a little bit of a release there, so you get that wah at the end, but you don't want that to be too long, or it can sound more like a wah, which is not what we're trying to have at the end of each of these. That, again, will sound messy. We want some kind of percussive hit to represent the end of the tone that our audience can perceive subconsciously, but we don't want them to notice it. Right? We don't want it to just stand out. Otherwise, the mix will get messy. We want this to sound quiet on the offbeat. rather than sort of resonating through the ba 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 ba. Or that was terrible. Rather than resonating through the ba 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 ba, we want it to kind of cut off and not resonate. Let's see. So we've got. Oh, I didn't actually check the volume level. This changed to the original volume. This. Oh, that's a bit too quiet. Still not loud enough. That might be right. Nope. Try 12. Well, now we're too loud. Go figure. So let's try, I think something like 10.5 is going to be about right. Just need to dial this in, make sure that we're at about the same volume. That'll make mixing easier on me later. That sounds about right. Oh, nope, never mind. Okay, maybe 12 was right. Yeah, okay, that sounds pretty similar. Let's go with that then. The 12 decibels of gain there. We have a short attack, long release. We have our threshold at about minus 30, and our expansion threshold there at about minus 40, with a pretty high expansion ratio. Yeah, about 4.5, about 20 decibels. We're doing something similar for most of these, giving them a little bit of a tail, but not too much. Some of these sounds will give more of a tail, but for the most part, we're going to try to keep the headroom to about 20 decibels for most of them. Let's see, so reordering some of these, this doesn't really make sense. We're going to put this here and this at the bottom. Then we want a compressor here. Now, most of these, you can see I started Dune Idea 4, 2023 up at the top. That is, this was made June of last year, and I have started reworking it in 2023 for release. So it is a little bit on the older side. For my tracks, I have last year I've spent most of the year just coming up with musical ideas, producing them to about this level, and then just sort of moving on and continuing with the idea of giving myself a steady content stream for this year and for next year. I'm going to start releasing these tracks. I've got not just these ones, but a bunch of other tracks I've been working on. I'm going to release a couple soon. I think by the end of the month, I'll be able to release maybe even 2. And then shortly after, I'll have a couple more coming out. And it's going to be just flowing from there, maybe 2 to 4 songs a month. Hopefully I could get up to 4 songs a month, but that might even be too fast. Maybe just 2 would be better, because I don't want to get through my whole backlog before really anyone has a chance to notice my channel and all my work put into this. So yeah, maybe 2, 3 might be better. I'm not sure. We'll see how the algorithm. So that's pretty nice. So we're working with this deep sub bass pan tone here, which should be a very spread out tone. Yeah, you don't really notice that one, but it is really important to have this kind of transient sound, it's called, especially in the bass tone, sort of a white noise kind of thing going on. Crucial, but we don't want to make this too loud. We do, however, want to take the edge off of it. So we're going to use a fit about 20 decibels of headroom, and we're going to compress it somewhat aggressively. That's not far enough. That sounds about right, I think. We'll give it a few decibels, something like 7. We need to change the parameters on the attack and release. A bit too quiet. Try 13. That's pretty nice. We want to give it a little bit less of a tail. Tail's a bit too much there. That's nicer. But again, still maybe too much of a tail. Let's try this. Okay, that sounded pretty good. And we can, let's see, our reverb now we need to think about. Where do we place this in the mix? We've got our sort of lead pluck kind of crunchy tone at 50% spread, so halfway, right smack in the middle of our face about here. And our 808 spread just beyond that at about 70, so here. And we want the sub bass pan, we want this to be spread out pretty far. So let's put this around 100. Tentatively, we might spread it even further. Usually I like to put these tones around 120, but we'll see how this works with the other bass layers. And we probably want to drag this reverb time down to something like 1.25. And again, our pre-delay, it's already at 2 milliseconds here, but 2 milliseconds is what we want. Let's hear this tone by itself. Yeah, it's nice. It's a lot cleaner now that we've gotten rid of most of that reverb time. And here is our EQ. We can see it is very much affecting the sound. That's what it would sound like without the EQ. We're giving it a lot of buzz, distorting it, warping it by bringing out certain tones in this. Quite nice. And yes, we want to spread the medium and high frequency. Let's see. That should sound pretty good. Although, actually, do the low and high. We want to bring those low tones in. Yeah, that's pretty good. Nice and panned out. And we're actually going to take that tone and double track it in the mastering pass and pan one hard left and one hard right and have those kind of wobble back and forth. So it's like a wah, 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 wah. That's going to be a really cool effect. But we don't have that in this because, well, it's not really needed at this point. It's a bit early to be doing things quite like that. But we'll get there, and there's some very cool after effects we'll put at the end. Let's see, we also have then this one, which is pretty similar. Similar notes, and again, it's just sort of a layer to add some transient sounds. This one is a lot more like a pad kind of a feel. And we want to, again, sort of space this out. We're going to put it right with the other one in terms of the reverb. So we're going to drag this EQ down, and then the stereo spread bit. I'm going to put the reverb out at 100%. And high cut at 7,000. Drag our reverb time down a bit to make a little more clarity on the sound. This should sound better already. Nice. That's great. We check our channel EQ. There isn't really much going on in this. I do want to add a high cut at 7,000. Oh, you can see this actually here. I'm going to add a high cut at 7,000. Make that a pretty hard high cut. That, I don't know how much that actually affects this sound. Yeah, probably doesn't really. And notice this high pass here is aggressively chopping out most of the bottom. But it sounds like if we don't chop it, this is strictly a layer that we have. And this is a different tone and a different tone and a different setting in Alchemy as well, compared to the other one here. We have very different sounds here with. And I don't think either of these are like anywhere near stock. So if I were to move this little deep button, it would change all of these settings over here on the right. Same with this. I've messed with these a lot. We started with the bright pan and the deep setting though. So if you wanted to make something similar, that would be probably a good starting place. Let's see, so we do need to put a compressor on this though. Just like the rest, this one needs compression too. We want to take out some of the top end there. Really bring out that growl. Pretty nice. I think we need to make this louder though. Maybe even louder than that. Yeah, that's about the same volume level. But this one has a lot more dynamic range to it. We have chopped out the very loudest parts of that sound and brought up the very quietest parts of that sound. Pretty cool. And we just want to check on this stereo spread. This is a low sound, so we're going to do a low frequency, high frequency spread for that one, just like before. And then with the equalizer on this, you can see we just put a high cut on that. Okay, so now we have this sci-fi slow art. That's what that's doing. This is pretty neat. This is fairly close to the vanilla sound. We did do some other stuff with it. You can see this actually already has some processing on it, which I don't really want to mess with too much. I'll leave that equalizer above it and actually put an equalizer at the end. You can do a second equalizer, which is totally fine. And a stereo. Go. This second equalizer is going to be really important to mostly just do a high cut at 7,000 to make sure that we don't wind up making our sound too shrill or clashing with the hi-hats. Again, I've got pretty much everything else cut around 7,000, so we want to make sure to cut this around 7,000. And then also, just for good measure, I'm going to put in a cut around 30 hertz as well, just to take out any like super low end like clicks or anything like that out of this, because we don't really want those either. It's already sounding a bit better. We want a mid and high frequency spread on that for you stereo listeners out there. Bring this, actually, I'm going to do the low cut at 50 hertz. That's nice. And this is currently spread at 200%. And you'll notice this right away. If I change this down to 100, any of you on speakers, I'm sure you felt that. This is a really big change. So we want to figure out where we want this. And this is something we do want more spaced out. So we probably want this over 100, but we do want it to be fairly prominent. So maybe something like 120 would be about right. Kind of spread it out more than a little, but not sort of overspread it. And then this is not a very dry sound, but definitely have more reverb. Let's try something about like this. Now it's a bit too dry. That's nice. So about 33% dry, 75% wet, seems to be about right. And we've got a short reverb time on this. I think that's fine. We don't really need a long reverb time on such a shrill sound. But this compressor is just not really doing the right thing here. Yeah. Need to mess with this compressor quite a bit. Something like this. We need to cut some of the tail out. Something along these lines. You can hear that clear up as I cut out that lower, resonant, kind of middle volume tone. And I can bring out this tail, and that's giving it a bit more resonance. You can hear it with the resonance, cut the resonance. With resonance. And that's just changing the expansion ratio on the compressor here for the expansion threshold. Very nice. So that sounds way better, although I'm worried it's a bit too quiet still. Let me see without it how loud it's supposed to be. Oh yeah, yeah, this is not nearly loud enough. Still too quiet. That sounds more. That sounds more. And I think I want to dial this down a little bit. This is maybe over-compressed. There's a little bit of a click that you can hear when it's over-compressed. Let's bring this threshold up to about 35 and bring up the expansion ratio to follow it. And I think if we bring this decibels down to 8 from 10, maybe too loud. Yeah, we're a little too loud now. Let's go down to 7 or 6. 6 is about right then. Out there. Okay, so we've got that done. Giving it that nice sustain. We've got some reverb, giving that some space around it that it's taking up. And we've got this equalizer doing a high cut and a low cut to make sure that sound is nice and tame. Finally, we put a stereo spread on that mid and high frequency spread this time because this is all pretty much high tones. We don't have much going on in the end. And yeah, we are most of the way there now. From here, a lot of this is copying some of the other settings. Here, this is our sci-fi fast ARP. This is very similar to the sci-fi slow ARP, except that it is fast. Yes, so it is much faster than the slow ARP. And it has, fortunately, the same settings, so we don't need to do anything here. What we can do is actually just duplicate this track and rename this fast ARP. And just drag that in there and delete the old track. Like so. And anytime we have this slow, fast kind of thing, I like to do that. That way the settings are the same and it sounds like just the speed has changed, which is pretty noticeable for the listener. If, say, these reverb or those kind of settings are a little different, the listener can pick up on, especially if they're really listening for that kind of thing, if they're a trained ear. Let's listen to this hollow, low-pass tone. Look at the EQ here. That, and without the high cut, sounds like that. Low cut there. Makes it a lot more bloopy and kind of spacey. Cool. And you can see also from Alchemy here that we've got a little bit of unison on this too. There are a few voices here that we can see in the equalizer actually. A little bit of detuned voices all around this. That's why instead of just having the pure tone, we have all this staticky sound. Because that's that detuned unison voices, making us have like a chord kind of thing, microtonal chord. That's nice, very cool tone there, but again, like the rest, the effects are just not really there yet. We need to do some more stuff. Gotta do reverb, our stereo spread, and our standard fare here. That sounds about right. Maybe it's a bit low now. I like that. We'll give it a much shorter attack, longer release. Cut out all that harmony. Give it a little more. Raise the volume up. Now we can hear that vibrato. And without the compressor, you can't hear that. Not nearly as prominent, at least. So it was very subtle, but now it's a little bit more prominent. And that's what this compressor is going to do for all of our tones, is bring out those subtle little intricacies that make each of these tones unique. Very cool. It's a nice example of the power of the compressor. Glad we got to show that off. Now this, we do want to be very echoey and spacey, but the default reverb time is 3 seconds. Again, that's ridiculous. So let's bring that up to like a 1.5 seconds. This is a long reverb still, but it's not nearly as long. Our high cut around 7,000, and we want this spread out, but not quite as spread as these ARPs. And remember, these ARPs were spread out to 120. So in fact, maybe we spread these ARPs further. Maybe we spread these ARPs out to like 150. They're a little further out, and then this low pass we can put between all that. So we can go to the platinum verb, put the spread, let's say around 140, just inside of those other two. And then this is a duplicate version of this that is just arpeggiated differently. So once again, we can just duplicate track. And then we need to go to the second track and speed up. We add the arpeggio and do arpeggiated 1/16. I believe that's right. 1/8 actually. Arpeggiated out to 1/8. And then we can drag this up. And I think we actually forgot to put the arpeggios on the... this would also be at 1/8. Yeah, now we can hear this is arpeggiated again. Which is kind of hard to hear until you compare it with something like this. But it's definitely going da 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 da. But notice that we can't really hear that. I think that is probably fine. Let's hear everything together. So I want it to feel a little bit more like ba 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 ba, more like that, rather than ba 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 ba, because that's really what makes this second drop a bit more distinct. And that's not really shining through as much with this tone as I would like. Let's actually, what we can do is raise the compression threshold a bit and raise the expansion threshold a bit, and that should allow more of that to come through. I wonder if maybe we compress it more. Oh, I noticed there is a reverb here. How about this release? Wait a minute, are these eighth notes? Yeah, so shouldn't this be on 16th then? That just not... Ooh, that is not correct. Oh, now it's doing it. Also doing this click, which I think is the release being too low. Sure. There we go. That's dialing that in. Tame this a little bit with the compressor. And that's got way too much low end here. Clean that out. By lowering the expansion threshold and increasing the expansion ratio. Then I think this is too loud. And they're about the same volume. That's good. Okay, so that should sound nicer. Let's change this for a sec and then back. Okay, but yeah, there we go. Oddly, it wasn't arpeggiating correctly until I put it back on correct arpeggiation setting. So that's perhaps something weird going on with duplicating the track. Here we go. Okay. But we did need to fiddle with that compression anyway. It wasn't quite right. Anyhow, where did we leave off? This one. The hollow low pass was what we got to. Did not quite finish all the layers. Oh, actually we did. Good. Well, we've been going for a little while. I'm going to take a brief break here, and we're going to come back and finish up the rest of this. I'll highlight what we've got left over. That's what we're working with so far, and then we're going to retool these drums another time. Got to do these, and then I've got another track that I want to put a little work. But we may not get to that, actually. It's getting quite late. I've got D&D soon. So, yeah. But I'll take a little break for now, and maybe we'll just finish this up and call it a day. Give it a playthrough. Well, while I get ready to take a break, we can hear sort of halfway through the add to our before, middle, after. position it, I guess. Okay, well, we are back with more GarageBand. And we've done a few of these sounds. There's more left to do. I have a copy to help me through the rest of this and through some dungeons. I'm very excited about. Let's see, so for now, we need to start with the dynamic processor up at the top. That EQ, dynamics reverb EQ spread. This I found is the best order for these. I'm going to do this. Just otherwise, if you have them mixed up in a different order, it sounds kind of weird. I don't know how to put it. I've tried all the different arrangements, and this one seems to be the best one. Just because I was bored one day, I tried like this the best. And we want to do, for this tone here, we're working with higher pitch notes. Yeah, primarily higher notes. So we definitely want, wait, what was I just messing with? Oh, I was doing this one, I see. Well, lower, over here. I have fast rep at the end here. There's the slower first, and the fast rep is later. One A, one octave. 1/4. Would that sound better if it were faster? Why do we have this so slow? I wonder what this sounds like up front. Because I have an idea. About this. Kind of weird. I don't actually recall composing this part. It's pretty, I guess. But it seems more like it belongs somewhere like in the breakdown. And we want like a weird kind of trippy sound. Maybe over here. Even that, I think it sounds better without it. If we put it on the fast button. Transmission slower from the project. Just in case I decide that's what I want to use. Okay, so this is really what we're worried about then. I guess that means the last thing we've done is this. Go down to the airy keys slower, and this is actually what we'll work on. I guess we needed to do a little bit more composition. That stuff. Let's check out this airy keys sound. We've just got all of this stuff. We need to save. Pretty. And we want to start by compressing the crap out of it. It's very plinky, very high pitched. I'm gonna give it 20 decibels of headroom, and we're going to drag this compressor way down. It's also got a really long reverb and tail. We're going to bring up the expansion threshold, and we're going to give it a little bit of an expansion ratio, We do kind of want a tail, but we don't want it to last forever. Also, reminder, you want always a short attack. So for us, 0.005 seconds, and a long release. So for us, 0.75 seconds. And we're going to need to increase the volume by some amount. Let's just hear it as it sounds. Whoops. It's not. Even that isn't very compressed. I think that's about right. That sounds nice. But we do need to make it louder. You hear that we've taken a lot of the edge out of that. And added in a lot of the quieter, more echoey tones of the keys are now being brought up because there's more space. There's a lot of gain happening. Now let's turn on some reverb. Again, the default for this is awful. Here, as soon as we turn the reverb on, it like splashes out really bad. We don't want that. That's because we have 10 millisecond pre-delay. Yuck. Bring that down to 2. We have 3-second reverb time. Yuck, yuck. Bring that down to 1.25. Our high cut is okay, but we want to raise that a little higher because I like the sound of it. And this is something we want spread way out. So let's spread this out to 180. And we're going to bring down the dry to something like 70, raise up the wet to something also like. In fact, we may want to take the dry out further. Not entirely sure. Maybe too dry. That's nice. We spread that way out there. Here you can see our EQ. What we've done here is we've really cut out the highest tones and we've raised up these middle tones here. Otherwise very quiet tone. And we want to slap a stereo spread on it. And we want to do medium and high frequency spread. That sound even better, especially if you're on speakers. Way, way out there. Very nice. Lots of harmonic, echoey kind of spaciousness to that sound. You definitely like that. You want to do something similar here. This already has a little bit of compression, but it's wrong because I was when I made this song, I was a noob. Still am a noob, but I'm less of a noob. Together, maybe we can become not noobs. Good. But we have this. That's pretty neat, right? But it's not really there yet because we haven't really done anything with this compressor. Headroom's a bit low. I like that. And we can raise this up a touch. Something like 7. Maybe not enough. Yeah. 10. That's too loud. And that's how it goes. And we want to adjust. We want to make our release really long, our attack really short. You can see that has a long tail. So we're going to clean that up. Good. Trims out that end. Want a little bit of a tail there. So yeah, there we've got a single echo, and then it kind of drops below audible range. That's nice. All right, so now we want to drag this equalizer down. And between the dynamics processor and the equalizer, put in a reverb. And here you can see our equalizer, actually. I realize I haven't put that up. A place where you could see it. What's going on with our sound? We go way up here. You can see it trims all that out. We turn this equalizer off, it sounds totally different. So this is really trimming out a lot of the tones and focusing in on a specific set of sounds and giving us that sort of feel. And then we want a stereo spread on it. Although we need to fix the reverb. The reverb is not quite right. This is something that we want to merge with the sound above it. This airy keys is playing the same thing as this. And we want them to sound like the same instrument. So we need to make their reverb settings the same, because otherwise they'll sound too distinct. This is a great way to sort of trick the mind into hearing two sounds as one, is to give them some kind of effect and make the effect exactly the same for both sounds. Let's see, and what was 370? So yeah, this is a little too dry. We're not going to do the same amount of dry and wet. We want this to be a little bit more resonant, maybe around 50, but not quite 70. Yeah, that's nice. And we do want this to be probably a little more dry, maybe around 80. That's not bad. Do these together. Whereas apart, they sound much less interesting. Or when they when we do something like this, they merge together. But I think they actually have slightly different stereo spreads also, which is not helping. We need medium and high. Medium and high. So now they should sound even closer together. Yeah, that's nice. So from there, we have the fast ARP from transmission. So we need to do this, right? Processor and then stereo spread. Now this one I think is relatively high pitched. Yeah, we want a medium and high stereo spread there. We'll do that. Medium and high spread. And then for reverb, this, we probably don't want this all the way out at 180. We want this in the same place as this hollow fast ICR. No, airy keys. This one. So I think these two things are playing the same thing. This is correct. This is all right. Yeah. Okay. So this is spread out to 180, which is the same place as this. I'm gonna move this. Let's spread this actually a little further inwards, maybe 60, so that we can layer it on. Give them their nice place to all sit there together. Okay, I don't really know what's going on with that one. We're gonna want to put stuff at the end here. Verb. Let me spread. We'll get to that sound in a minute. Now, I'm gonna set this to 160. We'll set the spread on the platinum verb. Now, that way all three of these sounds are spread out to the same spot at least. So they've begun to merge together. We need to do a little bit more merging. And as long as nothing else is at 160 on the spread, then those will have their nice little space. I like to keep things at least 5% away from each other, so we wouldn't want anything, say, between 155 and 165 at this point. Otherwise, it would start to get a little too cluttered. But especially with huge surround sound systems, that difference of 5 degrees is actually quite significant. So that is a pretty good amount of space. Let's see, where were we? We were on this one. And did I do, I don't think I did compression for this. Let's work on the compression here. Yes, that reverb is all wrong. This makes more sense now. We turned off all the effects except for the equalizer. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to apply a little bit of compression. Bring up those undertones. Let's give it a short attack, please. And big gain. Up gain. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on in that sound, and I like it. That kind of transient, wibbly-wobbly stuff, real quiet in the background, it actually adds a lot to the listener experience, even if they can't hear it. Like that. Good. It's maybe a bit loud, though. So perhaps we should raise this threshold up a touch. Bring that headroom down. And I guess we'll need a little bit less gain then. Because I like that, but it's a bit loud. So we'll try it here. I've taken the gain down by a bit. I've raised up the threshold. I also am going to do our expansion threshold and expansion ratio pretty sharp, like around 4 for our expansion ratio here. How present is that? Well, it's pretty present. Sorry, it's pretty present even without the compression. You know, maybe we just embrace it. It's weird. We like it. Although this tone is perhaps a little loud overall. And I think if we give it some reverb that makes sense. What we've done here is we've taken almost all of it out. In fact, we drop it down to 0% dry. This is just reverb at this point. We do want a little bit of dryness in it, maybe about 10%. So that makes it a lot less in your face in terms of the sound that it's providing, without really detracting from the space that you're trying to create, which is cool. And we're going to put a medium and high frequency spread on it. And there, we can also see the EQ for this sound is quite interesting. Interesting. Drop this down maybe a decibel. Somewhere on there. Because we want it to be audible at the beginning, but then quickly fade away. This is like very present. But it's actually really quiet. Put it around the minimum for feels like it's in the front. Still feels like it's there, like you're kind of grooving along with it, but it's actually like minus 10 decibels. So this is half as loud as a lot of the other stuff that's about to come in. Now you can't even really hear it now. But you're still kind of grooving with it, and it does set the groove in pretty nicely there. Kind of like percussive introductory thing. And this is good because DJs really, I hear, they don't like to play your track if you don't provide like a quiet kind of intro like that to build in and get a hint of what the key is going to be. Sounds pretty good. We're not quite there yet. Still got a few more sounds to go. So let's double check this one. That is compressed. We've got some verb on that. Got some EQ. Spread. Go on to the fast, mellow poly arpeggio. That's this instrument. Definitely sounds interesting. We need to add some stuff to it for sure. We add a verb, equalizer, and a stereo spread. And all is bad until we turn it off. So we're going to turn it off for now and start with the equalizer, actually. This second equalizer here, sometimes I'll use an equalizer to do sound design. And so that's what I did with the first equalizer, so we don't want to mess with that one. We're going to come in after all the other stuff that we're going to do and do another equalizer. We're going to be a little gentle with this one. We're just going to trim out the high end around 7,000 and the low end around 50. This just keeps everything sounding nice and clean. You wind up with a mix that doesn't muddy up as much if you when you have this kind of equalizer like I do at the top of the stack. For this sound, it's very important. Otherwise, this sounds really wonky without this equalizer. Here we can take that off for a sec. And it's like very clickety-clackety. It just doesn't sound kind of like it. But the second equalizer then, when we add on more effects, we'll make sure that the sound stays tame and doesn't start splashing into our hi-hat range or down into our bass drum range. See this. We want to do the compression here for this. Is the first thing we'll start with, and we'll compress it, I think, fairly hard. That's about right. And we can raise the volume up to about, I don't know, 7 or so. That's about right. Got a little bit of a fade out there. Maybe we make that fade out start sooner but last longer. And we want to give this a long release sort of attack. So it'd be perfect on the compression, and we go into the reverb here. Again, the default settings are trash. We'll make everything sound bad. This, what are we trying to layer this with? It seems like something which we would want to set out at the 180 mark. This sort of is very spaced out in a part of the breakdown. We also probably want to take a lot of the dryness out of this and make it mostly a reverby too. And bring down the reverb length, something like a little over a second. Something like that. But with this kind of arpeggio, this much reverb is a bit much. Let's try dropping it down to half a second. Sounds a bit better. Maybe we do want this to be more dry. Something more like 90. That sounds, it's maybe too wet. Try 40 on the wet. That's nice. This is always supposed to be a pretty washed out sound. And we add the stereo spread. We'll do mid and high frequency spreading here. Yeah, and you can hear those high end notes a lot better now. Sounds much cleaner. Very cool. Okay, so that's that. To the next one, we have this mellow polyarp slow. So we're actually just going to copy this. This is the same thing, I think, except it's, what, 1/8 instead of 1/16? Oh. But, oh, right. So what it is the track is composed differently. We get your quarter notes instead of the longer note, or instead of the shorter eighth notes here. This pattern that we get at the beginning. Later on, get different notes. Okay. Go into this. This is much shorter. Okay. Then actually, yeah, we do need to just duplicate this. But we just drag this up, rename it. And this is important because we actually want to make different stems for these. That's why I'm keeping these tracks separate. This should be correct. Okay. Let's see. So we've got that nice and spaced out. That's good. In fact, maybe that's too spaced out. Let's bring that in. Put that like 130. Oh wait, this was meant to be layered with this. Yeah, actually, let's bring all of these. Oh, I had them at 150? I didn't realize that wasn't joined up with them. 160, 160. Wait a minute. This might fix it. Put this at 160 then. Oh, that sounds way better. Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize that I thought I had these three things all spaced together, but I did not yet. Much cleaner now that those are all overlapping properly. Good. And then we have this transient chord pattern. That's gives a sort of rising and falling kind of effect and follows the chord progression. It's really nice to have this kind of like bouncing pad going. Again, just giving a sense of groove, giving something for somebody somewhere on the dance floor to latch onto and kind of get hooked in. And you want to have a lot of those little groove hooks that are there in your beat. Blend. Let's see. Nice, quiet, subtle things for them to get caught on without realizing. Start bouncing a little bit. We need to do a few more effects. We've got a few more. So I've got echo, platinum verb, EQ here on this. So let's put some compression here for that. And we'll put the stereo spread at the bottom of the stack. We'll take a look at the EQ. You can see this is a heavily filtered tone. A lot going on with that EQ. back, grab this dynamics processor, and we'll take a look at this sound with 20 decibels of headroom or thereabouts, and a compression threshold of around, let's say, minus 45. That took way too much out of it. It's probably like minus 30. I might still be taking too much out of it, but let's try to clean up the lower end of the reverb here. No, I think we're still overcompressing it. Let's bring this up to like 30. That's maybe not high enough. Okay. So something about like minus 33, I think it's going to be about right. Let's try this. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And we want to do, say it with me now, short attack, long release. Okay. .5 decibels then of gain. There we go. That's about right. That's got some nice processing on it there, bringing out some of the uniqueness of that, chopping out some of the harsher, shriller sounds, giving it some roundness. Good. Let's see, we then need to tune this reverb, which is probably bad. Well, no, actually, this reverb is pretty good for what it is. Although we want to change the spread, be probably way out there, like 190. And this is going to be a mid and high frequency spread. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, we made some improvements to this tone. Almost done. We've still got this pressing chord pattern, which pops in towards the end. Need to mess around with a bit. You can hear that's pretty shrill. And this one, I've been thinking, we might use something called a de-esser. Let's try putting that in after this. Under dynamics, yeah. De-esser here. And what this does is make things less shrill. This is with the de-esser. Here those notes are pretty shrill, very high up there. This is without the de-esser. Even more piercing. We can take that piercingness out with this de-esser. That sounds pretty nice. And we'll just have that in probably before the stereo spread. I'm going to put in a dynamics processor and some reverb. I don't want to leave this sound sounding stock. That is not at all what we need to do. We can think of these stock sounds as starting points. They do a lot of the initial sound design for us, and then we can take that and run with it and do our own sound design on top of it. That's at least how I like to approach things. And let's see. So for this, the reverb off for a second because it's going to sound like garbage. And check out this compression, which is also wrong because it starts out wrong for sure. There. That's about right. Still a little too quiet. Maybe 8.5 decibels of gain here. Seems about right. No, that's still too quiet. Maybe 9.5. Yep, that's about the same. Okay. So then let's figure out this reverb situation here. This is kind of its own thing, isn't it? We want it to kind of be close in the middle of the mix. Let's leave this at 100 for starters. I think that might actually sound pretty good. If this just kind of comes in right at the sides. Be a little further out, but 110. Go to the back. Okay, still standing out though. I tried. Give it a bit more reverb. I'm gonna raise this up to about 7,000 hertz for the cutoff. I think that sounds pretty nice. And that's all coming in pre-stereo spread, which we want to do medium to high. Next, we're on to the last sound. Very cool, with a little bit of time to spare. Hey, that's exciting. And here's the last thing. We've got this percussive square note, just tracking out groove, basically. Pretty simple. Important sound, though. We want to make sure that it's there and that it's present, but not overbearing. This has got a lot of reverb on it. It's got spread way out there. In fact, I think it's perhaps spread a bit too far. Let's spread this out to like 175 or something. Let's see, we'll compare that to the spread on this, which I think is at 160. 190, actually. Interesting. So probably want this to be a little further in. Let's see how that sounds together. Yeah, we do want that a little farther in. That's basically a secondary lead for this part. Might actually sound better though if we subvert that and make it more like 190. Sort of space it way out there. I actually kind of like that better. So that's pretty nice. We've got some good verb there. We've got, I think, an equalizer in the sound design here. Yeah, so we want to put a secondary equalizer. Let's put a compressor, our dynamics processor before the reverb. Our equalizer after the processing, and then stereo spread last. And this equalizer, the second equalizer, again, we use this just to keep things tame post-processing by cutting at 7,000 hertz and 50 hertz. For these high-pitched synth sounds, below 50 hertz, it's just clicks, and above 7,000 hertz, it's just whining and like shrill, scratchy sounds that would interfere with our hi-hats. So doing this will create space for our hi-hats and make the sounds a little bit easier on the ears. This reverb is not correct. No, this is what we want to do with it. It's the compression that is. Okay. More attack. More release. And you can hear it still has that percussive click, but now we've brought out a bit more of the harmonic stuff going on there too. It's pretty nice. We just fine-tune the sound a bit. Really get it to sound the way that I want it to sound. Maybe a bit more tail there. Something like that. Okay. And that is that. So let's, guess we are going to end the stream soon, I suppose, now that I've done all of this. Let's take one last listen to the song, and sort of an after, to get an idea of the change that has been made. Pretty dramatic, I must say. Really excited to work on the drums some more, and then take this into mastering and put it out probably right at the end of January. Let's take a listen, and I guess since I have some extra time, I'll go ahead and play through some of the other songs that I've been working on, give you an update on those. I had them on stream recently, show off some of the progress we've had. This is the change that we have done so far. Thanks for hanging out. Really am glad that everyone was here. Appreciate ya. Hope that you'll click that follow button. Thanks for showing me some love in advance. Really appreciate that. Lets me know that you like what you're seeing. I can make some more of it. And make sure to go up next time. Or anytime in the future, honestly, if you can't make it, the next one. I play games, make music. I hope you liked that. That is coming out soon. We got some more mastering to do to put some more shine on it, but that's pretty much what it's going to sound like. With a bit more shine and a bit better drums. The drums are going to slap way harder when it comes out. And I'm actually going to do that. I don't know if I'll do this one, but I'm definitely going to do quite a bit of drum programming on stream here in the upcoming week.